So now I have just written a servlet. I've gone into my first web project. I've created a new servlet, and I called it fruits. And just so you can get access to this, I made it available here. gw.gl f small t small j capital S capital T small I. Right, I'm just going to go through it very quickly before I run it. Okay, the important method is the do-get here. I have done the things we always do. I've set the content type to HTML, and I've made sure I've got a print writer so I can write back to the browser and talk to the browser. Now, I've connected to the database here. The way I do that is a little bit strange. I have to use this specific string. So I've set it up first, jdbc : and then the name of the database, : / localhost means my local machine. I could replace this with 127.0.0.1, or I could also replace this with the complete IP address of my machine, which I showed you how to get before when you go into configuration. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like that because that's adaptable. The port that MySQL listens on is 3306, and if you remember, the database which we created was called MyThings. There it is there. Okay. So I'm going to jump back to Eclipse. All right. So I put those inside something called a properties file. By the way, you need to import at the very start. You'll need to add a couple more of imports. You have to import java.util.star to get that properties file, and you'll also have to import java.sql.star. SQL stands for structured query language, which is what you use to talk to a database. Okay, so I was back here. You make a new properties file and you put into it user, and whatever you called the username. I've called the only one I've created so far is root. And the password, and if you remember, our password was compsci. So once you've made this little bundle, this properties with those two things inside it, you use that to get a connection from the driver manager. Now, first of all, you'll just need to copy this code into Eclipse, because this is going to be the same for virtually every MySQL database, and it was taken straight from the manual. So you can copy that and just replace it with your username, well, with your password, whatever password you decided. And you can copy this code, and apart from the bit where I print out connected successfully, that's also never going to change. Now we get to the bit where we actually ask the database for some information. So I use something called a statement. I create a statement, which is an SQL sentence asking for something. I make that string, a string called SQL equal to select star from fruits. And that just means give me all the fruits in the table. I create a new result set, and I make it equal to that statement that I've just made dot execute this sentence. So in other words, I'm going to run this sentence against the database, and whatever it gives me back will come back into this variable as a result set. Now, a result set is very similar to an array list. It's a collection, and I can just iterate through it with the dot next. So I've got a while loop here. It says while result set rs dot next. So while there are still more items inside it, I go through and I get each of the column names. So if you remember, in our database, we had a fruit had an ID, a name, a color, a price, and if it was poisonous, well, I get each of those. I say int ID equals rs.getInt ID. String fruit name equals rs.get string and then name. Dot get string color, dot get string get double price, rs.get boolean poisonous, and I put each of these values for whatever that column is into a variable, and then directly below I just print them out in HTML. So out.print ID followed by whatever the ID is, and BR means line break. drops a line down and goes to the next line. So what I'll get is a list of the different items for that fruit: the ID, the name, the color, the price, and whether it's poisonous or not. By the way, I jumped back into the database there just because I was kind of curious about why my prices were rounding up to the nearest dollar. And I just looked very, very quickly at the fruits table, and I noticed that I'd defined it as decimal 10,0, which means 10 digits and 0 decimal points. That's why it was rounding up. Okay, so really what I should really do is change that to like 2 decimal points, and I probably wouldn't need, you know, 10 numbers for the price of a fruit. So let's give it about 5, 4, and you know, as long as I'm just gonna close that, execute it, save, off you go, apply. There we go. Shouldn't have that problem anymore. And just in case, what I'm going to do, just to prove it, is I'm going to type in something else. Let's make it a blackberry black, and I'm going to make that $4.30. 4.30. Poisonous. No, it's not poisonous, and you can see that hasn't rounded up here. Okay. Just gonna apply that. There we go. Okay, so back to my servlet. So I've gone through the results that the fruits that have been given back. I've got the information about them. I've printed it out in HTML. The only thing that's left to do really is close the connection that I made to the database, close the statement, close the result set, and finally, as long as there's been no error, I print, you know, close body, close HTML, and I send it back to the browser. So let's give it a shot, see what happens. I'd be lying if I told you I didn't run this first. I know it works, so let's just give it a go. There we go. Okay, doesn't look wonderful, doesn't look very impressive, but at the minute it's just a little test. You can see I've gone through all the different fruits, including the blackberry that I've just added. You can see it in there's 4.3 for $4.30. You can see the poisonous has come out as true and false, even though it was tiny int inside the database, if you remember. Now, I want to show you quickly what we've done, just to get it very, very, very clear, because this is our end-to-end, or our full stack test. This would be a good prototype to show after, you know, a couple of lessons of trying to get things set up. So we have a web page. Well, we don't actually have a web page. We've got a web browser, which talks to Tomcat, as you know already. And inside Tomcat, where'd that go? Place. Here inside Tomcat we have got a servlet, which is called fruit. There we go. And that is talking to a database server, which is MySQL. And inside MySQL we have a database. Let's give it a different shape, why not? And that database is called MyThings, I think. Okay, there we go. And what's happening is that our browser is asking Tomcat. Well, it's got the address of this servlet, so it's talking to the Tomcat server and asking for the servlet. This servlet is running. And when it gets down to the connection bit, it's connecting to the database, MySQL database. And then it is running a query, an SQL query, which selects all of the fruits. And that gets a record set returned back to it. And it's iterating through those and making an HTML string, which it's sending back to the browser. And that's getting displayed as our list of fruits. So we have all 3 tiers, as we call them, of the system tested. There's one more thing that we have to do to make this a little bit more, well, 2 more things to make it a little bit more meaningful. The first thing would be to, instead of just printing this out in an ugly way, would be to make a JSP page. Put that in there. Make a JSP page, and instead of making this ugly string and printing it back to the browser, we would then redirect to the JSP page, which would act as a template, and send that back to the browser instead. So we could design this page, this JSP page, in HTML in a very nice program which will allow us to lay everything out nicely, put them in a table or a list, and then just fill that list up directly from the database. But that's next. We've broken off the major complication of this system. It's got 3 tiers. We have 3 different things. We've got a browser talking to a web server, talking to a servlet, talking to a database, returning some information, formatting it into HTML, and returning it back to the browser. So that's a pretty good place to stop. Next thing we're going to look at is JSPs and how to use them as templates.